All right. Well, thank you again for joining us in the fifth of our equine dealer nutrition series. And this time around, we're going to talk about feeding the senior horse, which is a pretty hot topic. It's one of the most popular topics we get asked to speak about, and for good reason. A lot of people ask the question, when is a horse actually considered a senior? And their answer is there's really no hard and fast rule about that. Horses, like people, age differently. So, if you take two 18-year-old horses, some may be very healthy and look much younger. Others may be very tired and have a lot of stiffness. It really just depends on their life and their health care and their individuality. But typically, by the time a horse is aged 20, no matter health status, they're generally showing some signs of aging, and that can mean a lot of different things. And on top of that, one of the reasons why the topic of seniors is becoming so popular is because the population of senior horses is growing. In 1998, we were looking at only about 7.5% of the horses in the United States over 20 years. Fast forward almost 10 years later, we're up to 11.5%. So we've got better health care, we've got more research specifically focused on senior horses, and we've done a better job at controlling parasites throughout their lifetime. So that's going to help. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Now, as you may or may not know, Buckeye Nutrition is part of, or we partner with the WALTHAM Center for Pet Nutrition in the UK. So through WALTHAM is sort of the hub of research that Mars Pet Care does. So we look into a lot of different aspects of all pet health, but when it comes to horses, seniors is one of our three focus areas. And we generally categorize seniors in one of four ways. The young at heart, which is the horse that you would look at, and again, looks very spry, very healthy, no major clinical conditions. You have the older horses that are very easy keepers that tend to gain weight. I find those to be a little more rare than the horses that tend to lose weight or are harder keepers, but they are out there for sure. And the fourth category is the geriatric animal, which has some kind of health problem or multiple health problems. And again, the diet and the way we feed these horses can depend on any of these things. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of individual variation. So not all horses age the same way. They don't all show the same signs of aging, and some outward physical signs that are generally observable by the eye. They may have some gray hairs. They may not be able to exercise for as long as they once were. They may be a little stiffer. And again, you might see a loss in muscle tone, which is also known as sarcopenia. And some recent research has actually shown that older horses may have a decreased diversity of microbial species in the hindgut. Now, what the implications for this are not fully understood yet, but we know that there are some changes happening in the digestive tract that are a little bit different than what we knew before. So again, once we go through some of this background, we'll get into some more feeding recommendations. But again, horses age in a similar way to the way people do. So as I'm going through, we may be going, oh yeah, I can relate to that. And as we age, our immune system changes. That's a natural response. We call it immunosenescence, or aging of the immune system. And in old horses, we know that they have different reactions to vaccines and to pathogens, and sometimes a harder time fighting infections. Their vision may change. In certain breeds, particularly Appaloosas and some stock horses, some of them are more prone to uveitis or moon blindness and may have an increased risk of glaucoma. Now, just because your horse gets older doesn't mean this is going to happen, but again, it tends to be another risk factor. And for a long time, when it comes to nutrition, we thought, well, horses just need more fortification as they get older because they lose digestive efficiency. And that's sort of the way I learned it. But again, some new research has said, you know what, that's really not the case. Most of the time, it seems to trace back to bad teeth and horses not being able to chew properly. In horses that have not had good parasite control, they may have some scarring on the GI tract that could cause problems, but more, in modern times, that tends to be more of an obsolete reason because we have almost gotten too good at parasite control. Again, muscle wasting can make a horse appear like they're losing weight, called sarcopenia. Do they have a lowered ability to digest fiber? Maybe that has something to do with the change in the microbial population. We're still looking into that. But age alone does not significantly affect digestive efficiency in horses, and that research has been partially conducted by WALTHAM. But we know that to be true now. One thing that can affect a horse's nutritional needs is season. It's actually harder for older horses, and people for that matter, to regulate their body temperature or thermoregulate, and that has to do with plasma volume, which has to do with water. And body condition, how fat or thin a horse is, can also affect their ability to handle changing temperatures. And when it comes into summer, which officially we start in a few days, temperatures rise. Obviously, horses sweat more. They may be working harder if they're sound and in that line of work, and they may lose more electrolytes and be more prone to dehydration. Horses that are older or overweight are actually less tolerant of heat and exercise. It doesn't mean they can't handle it. It just means that their thresholds for what they can handle is lower. And when you get rapid temperature changes, for example, from cold to hot, when people in the winter, say, ship their horses from the Northeast down to Florida for competitions, it can actually be a shock to the system and cause them to actually stop sweating, at least for a period of time. So adaptation is needed. So that's a little bit beside the fact, but it is important when it comes to nutrition. Same for winter, which hopefully is a ways off for us. But the major effect of cold is an increase in energy needs. And again, it is harder for those older horses to keep warm. But that's one of the reasons why we always recommend an increase in hay at that time, shelter, and the older horses, even if they've never worn a blanket, sometimes it can really be beneficial to them to conserve energy, and instead of burning all that energy away, they can hold on to it and help maintain their condition. So I mentioned dentition earlier, and I do want to spend a few minutes talking about that. Healthy teeth, it seems common sense, right? Very important for chewing and being able to properly grind up food. So the graphic on the left shows a schematic of what a normal horse's mouth would look like, with the molars in the back, incisors in the front. Anytime a horse, our modern horses generally don't roam the range grazing all day, of course, so they don't necessarily wear their teeth in a normal way, and that's why they need to have annual exams. And sometimes they can develop these points and these hooks. So again, this picture, you should be able to see these little abnormalities on the outside here by where I'm pointing the mouse. Those are pretty sharp. If you've ever bitten your cheek, you know what that feels like. Now imagine your tooth digging into it every time you chew. You wouldn't be too anxious to eat either. So this on the right is after that those points have been removed. Much smoother, much more comfortable for the horse. This is a hook in front of the molar at the back of the mouth, and again can easily jab into that soft, sensitive tissue in the cheek, and you can sort of see that ulcer there. So again, if you've ever felt one of these during a horse's dental exam, it literally feels like the point of a nail. They can be very, very sharp. So it's why dental care is so important. Causes of poor dentition, it can just be, again, normal wear and tear. Horses, especially older horses, may be subject to loss of teeth, or just generally a lifetime of having their teeth neglected. So it's never too late, but always encourage your customers to have their vets examine teeth. It's very, very important. So it's not just, I can create the best feed in the world, but if the horse can't eat it, it's not going to do very much good. I do get a lot of questions about horses that quid their hay. So in the picture on the right, it looks like this little ball of chewed up hay. And I'll ask people, does your horse eat hay? And they'll say yes. And I'll say, does he quid his hay? And they'll say, yes, but I feed him, X amount of pounds per day. And it's a little bit misleading because I think a lot of times owners feel that their horses are actually consuming more than they really are, especially if they're quitting. Because if they're spitting this out, they're not swallowing it. It's not getting into the digestive tract. So that's a big concern, and that's a big consideration when I'm talking to people about their horses' diets. So again, if the horses can't chew, they can't take in nutrients. If they can't chew properly, they may be at increased risk for choke. Owners may see longer fiber length in the manure. That can be a clue as well. So again, teeth are important. So we'll move on from teeth and we'll talk about some other changes that often happen with older horses. PPID, or equine Cushing syndrome, it's not a given that an old horse has PPID, but it is most commonly diagnosed in older animals. Insulin dysregulation, we talked about this in our last discussion about equine endocrine disorders. Metabolic syndrome, which is similar to type 2 diabetes in people. And we do know that there is some level of insulin dysregulation that happens as the horse ages, but it's all very individual. It may be part of aging alone, it may be part of improper weight management, or it could be secondary to PPID or Cushing syndrome. We know that as horses age, they have a decreased cortisol concentration. So what does that mean? Cortisol affects immune function, it affects glucose dynamics, and some other things. I'm not going to get into too many more details than that, but it is important for regulating overall hormonal normality and, of course, energy regulation. Now, as a horse ages, there may be some increases in stress, and stress can be anything that sort of alters the horse from its comfort level. As a horse ages, they may not be as aggressive. They may fall in social pecking order and be, if they're in a group, they may be less likely to get hay. Environmental stress, as we talked about earlier, hot and cold. They may have pain. They may have arthritis. If they have pain in their neck, but they're being fed on the ground, that can be a real challenge. They may not be comfortable putting their face or their neck all the way down, and perhaps that feed platform needs to be raised, or hay needs to be fed in a feeder or hay net. And as we just talked about, there may be some changes in hormone production as well. How stress may manifest, again, very different to each horse. They may stop eating or drinking or decrease their appetite, lose weight. If they don't drink enough, they may colic. They may be reluctant to move. There may be some behavioral changes. And these are general, of course, not necessarily exclusive to a senior horse, but something to keep an eye out for. So for that older horse that is a harder keeper, again, a number of causes: stress, bad teeth. There may be a clinical disease process. There could be kidney or liver disease, muscle wasting, hormonal changes. Maybe they're just a picky eater and they are out there. I always joke that I feel like the seniors know that if they stop eating, that the owner will run to the store and buy several different kinds of feed for the horse to choose from until they find what they like. On the flip side, the overweight animal could be lack of exercise, and there may be reasons for that. They may be physical, or they may be that the horse owner or manager doesn't exercise them. Overfeeding grain is common, other metabolic changes, and when we lose muscle, we actually burn less calories doing nothing than we did if we had nice, strong, toned muscles. So as muscle loss happens with age, it's a use it or lose it scenario. If you don't continue to work to maintain that muscle tone, you'll actually lose it faster. So again, with less muscle tone, you'll burn less calories. Other clinical conditions, again, we talked about this a little bit. Equine Cushing's, metabolic syndrome, potential increased episodes of colic, alterations in heart-lung function or cardiovascular function, and other things. Older horses also tend to have a decline in fertility, and that's not unusual. That's part of the natural course of aging. We'll get a little more into the nutrition of it now as we've gone through some background, but it is a myth that just because a horse is old, he's going to be skinny. That absolutely does not have to be the case. So I found this little cartoon, and I thought I would put that in there for a little break in the action there. But as with any horse, when you're looking at a senior horse's diet, it's important to consider what that horse does for a living. Are they retired? Are they still breeding? Are they still working in competition or trail riding? How much turnout do they have? These are all important factors. And what other individual things are important? What other health conditions are there? How fit is the horse? What is their body condition? Are they stiff? Are they sound? Are their teeth good? These are all things that need to be thought about. And when we think about a senior diet, we generally think about feeds that are very digestible, that have a lot of fiber, easy to chew, they're nutrient dense, they taste good, obviously, and we certainly want to minimize digestive stress. And one of the ways we do that at Buckeye, as you know, is that we design our feeds in a fixed formula manner, meaning we do not change our ingredients when we manufacture our feed. They're always the same. We bake the cake the same way every time. Senior feeds are often formulated with higher fiber, so fiber ingredients like beet pulp, soybean hulls, even something like oatmeal byproduct. People sometimes look at the label and they see that word byproduct and they automatically think it's a garbage ingredient. Well, of course, that's not the case. It is a good fiber source. And even though a senior feed has higher crude fiber in it, they still need some form of long stem fiber, even with complete feeds. And we'll talk about complete feeds in a moment. Products that have pressure cooked or extruded products in them are very good, like our Equate gut health products. Even pelleted feeds, where horses can't sort out what they like. Pelleted feeds tend to be fairly uniform, so each bite is the same. And of course, they may be highly fortified, or if they're complete, they may be fortified at a slightly lower level because they're designed to be fed at a higher level, if that makes sense. So again, I did mention complete feeds, and complete feeds come in handy in a number of situations, particularly for horses that can't really chew hay, or if they have very limited forage intake. So these are designed to be fed in higher amounts. For example, the Wrangler is fortified a little bit lighter. So it may have, for example, 50 IUs per pound of vitamin E, as opposed to another feed like the Equate that has 200. But Equate, you feed 5-6 pounds of it. Wrangler, you can feed 15 pounds of it. So you don't want to overdo it. But again, that's why these are designed the way they are. They can be great hay extenders as well, especially if a horse can eat some hay. Or honestly, even if somebody's traveling a lot and they want a consistent fiber source in their horse's diet. So again, these two particular examples of our complete feeds are senior pelleted and the Wrangler pellets. The senior textured is not a complete feed, but the senior pelleted is. Just a little point of clarification there. So again, I talked a little bit about feed form, and in particular when it comes to the Equate product, the senior gut health, and I'll put a little graphic up in a moment, so it targets the entire digestive system. So it contains that extruded nugget, and extruded nuggets are very easy to break down. A horse it's not that they don't need to chew it, but they could gum it if they had proper saliva production, or if an owner would wet down the feed a little bit, it'll mush up very quickly. The higher fat content helps with those horses that are harder keepers. It has those really good important fiber sources like beet pulp and soybean hulls that help maintain that hindgut microbial population, which we know is so important, but we still have a lot to learn from it. And of course, it is a controlled carbohydrate feed. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end, just a quick overview. So I wanted to emphasize the Equate Senior just a little bit. I really like this graphic because it illustrates how the product targets the entire gut. When it comes to brain and behavior and the stomach, it is, as I mentioned, a controlled carbohydrate product. So at about 21.5% starch and sugar, the aim is to not create this huge surge in sugar and insulin. Also, controlled carbohydrate diets are good for horses with ulcers or any kind of sensitive stomach. It'll help It'll help minimize risk of irritation. The extruded nuggets in the feed are really great for the small intestine because they're easy to digest and they break down and absorb very quickly. And then, of course, the fiber ingredients are designed to support a healthy hindgut. So each part of the tract gets a benefit. So I'd be remiss not to mention forage. And again, not all seniors are in the situation where they can't have forage. And in fact, I would say the majority of them can. It just depends on each individual. So forage is always the most important component of the diet. It's necessary for normal digestive function, as you know. And again, sometimes sufficient intake can be challenging. And again, it depends. Do you have pasture available? Is there only hay available? Can that hay be soaked to provide extra water? The answer, of course, is yes. So then you get water and fiber helping to improve passage through the digestive tract. But sometimes forage alternatives are necessary. And whereas traditional hay may be difficult for some horses, hay cubes can be really beneficial. Now, when I recommend hay cubes to horses that have trouble with forage, of course, I always recommend that they be soaked. Hay cubes absorb a ton of water, a lot of water. So I always say add more water to the bucket, let them soak for a good 30 minutes, and if it looks dry, add more water because they will absorb a lot. But it's chopped pieces of hay, as you know, and sometimes the horses have a lot easier time with that. For seniors, I would generally try to stick to a Timothy cube rather than straight alfalfa or the Timothy alfalfa mix. The Timothy cubes do exist. Sometimes you have to look at them. Some distributors may or may not carry them. Worst case, if you can only find a Timothy alfalfa mix, you can make that work too. There are fiber pellets out there, pelleted hay. There are things like beet pulp. And again, I always recommend soaking any of these things. But you know what beet pulp looks like. They're very small little shreds. For seniors, definitely the shreds with no molasses are preferred. And they're, again, really good fiber sources. Also for the hard keeper, you're all familiar with Ultimate Finish 25, a high fat source. Any oil and fat is concentrated energy, and it is safe for those horses that need to have or that have endocrine problems like insulin resistance or Cushing's syndrome. And the side benefit is, of course, you get a nice shiny coat. And again, those carbohydrates in senior horses should be controlled, so these fat products can really be a good way to do that. Vitamins, minerals, and proteins. One of the most common questions I get with respect to senior horses is about top line. And they say, you know, I have this older horse and he's just not holding his top line anymore, and I'm not really sure what to do. And there's a couple of factors to that. Of course, exercise, and maybe not all seniors are exercising at the level that they used to, which could cause some of that muscle loss. And nutrition is the other piece of it. So you need to give them the proper building blocks to maintain that muscle tone. So as you know, Grow and Win is one of the top recommendations for that. It can supplement those horses that are not getting grain, who only get poor quality forage. It has those chelated minerals. And what that means, chelated minerals are designed to optimize absorption. So when you chelate a mineral, you basically attach it to something like an amino acid. You'll see, for example, zinc proteinate. And what it does is neutralize the charge, because minerals have charges, positive or negative. And when it's neutral, the thought is that there's less interference in the gut and more chance for that mineral to be absorbed and directed where it's supposed to go, rather than being distracted and getting, lost in the shuffle. So that's why we chelate them. Those essential amino acids that we talk about almost every time we get together, lysine, methionine, threonine, these are the basic building blocks for muscle, among other things in the body. Muscle's only one of the jobs, but without them, you're not going to have a good top line. So you need those basic nutritional components as half of the equation. And then, of course, any turnout, any light riding that can be done will be the other half, and it will help maintain muscle tone. So in those vitamins, some in particular, E and C, are potent antioxidants, which is great for helping to protect cells, helping to improve cellular repair. And vitamin E, you'll find it in fresh forage and, of course, in fortified concentrates. The horse produces his own vitamin C, but in a horse that has any kind of liver problem, that's going to be an issue, and they may not produce enough, in which case a supplement would be warranted. B-complex vitamins are great for energy. You'll find these B-complex vitamins in Grow and Win. And very often, the microbes in the hindgut produce them as well, which is one reason why there's not a requirement per se. And they are water soluble, so anything a horse consumes that they don't need will just be excreted in the urine. Minerals, we covered this in an earlier talk, of course, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much, but they are critical in overall health at any age. Even though they make up only a tiny portion of the diet, minerals are involved in anything from enzymes to acid-base balance to actually the structural components of the body and much, much more. So obviously we design feeds to make sure that we're optimizing the resource for the horse. I talked about protein a little bit earlier today, and of course, just to review, those essential amino acids again are going to be key for helping the horse maintain top line. Nutrition alone is not going to do it. A lot of people are hopeful that if they just feed the right supplement or they just feed the right protein, that all the muscle is magically going to reappear. I wish it were that simple, but again, it's only part of the equation, and any kind of moving is helpful. And again, that doesn't mean that somebody needs to exercise their horse 7 days a week. They may not be sound enough for that, but turnout helps. Trail riding, any kind of light work will help. Some other product benefits that you'll see, especially in our senior Equate gut health: yeast culture, which helps to improve fiber digestion. This is mostly true when the quality of fiber is not that great. So if your hay is a little mature, yeast culture can really help. We add probiotics that are known to be beneficial in the horse. There's still obviously a lot to learn about probiotics, but the one that we add to our feeds are known to be beneficial to the horse. The prebiotics we've talked about a lot. Again, those are the fiber sources. Those are the fiber sources that feed the microbes in the hindgut, that feed the probiotics. And with some senior horses that are on maybe more of a complete pelleted ration, the more frequent meals you can give in smaller volumes, so small frequent meals, is ideal to help reduce that digestive upset. And that's of course true for any horse. Key recommendations for seniors, aside from good basic nutrition: regular vet checkups, deworming, maintaining the teeth is key. Any infection that you suspect, any fever, faster you respond, the better you'll be off. In the winter, blanketing, sheltering. In the summer, for those horses with Cushing's syndrome that grow a long coat, they may need to be body clipped, and they may need to be body clipped more than once. Shade and shelter are very helpful. Water, important for all horses, as you know. Anything to encourage them to drink, even if they are in a herd and if they have fallen to the bottom of the pecking order, provide a second water source or multiple water sources so that horse can maybe get away from the group and be able to consume water at will. Sometimes you can flavor the water. You can use peppermint oil or electrolytes. Our Perform and Win electrolytes can be diluted in water, but make sure if you do that, if you flavor the water for horses, make sure you also offer a regular plain bucket of water in case they really refuse to drink it, so they have an option, and then see which one they like. And of course, a mineral block available at all times, salt and mineral block. And I did mention electrolytes, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about them. So the major electrolytes: sodium, chloride, potassium, calcium, magnesium. And what electrolytes do, they're critical for proper muscle function. And they're also critical for water balance, which again, going into summer, is a big deal. Water follows salt. When you sweat, you lose salt. Water goes out of the body. But when you replace it, and you replace it properly, it'll help drive the thirst to drink. So Perform and Win, while it is designed to replace the electrolytes that are specifically lost in sweat. So some of the Waltham research there actually, there's a way to measure horse sweat. So we did that. We measured sweat, we analyzed the content of that sweat, and we developed the electrolyte in that vein to say, okay, well, the horse loses this, this is how we're going to put it back. So even for senior horses, when they do sweat, it can be a little bit of a boost to help regain the balance, especially on very hot, humid days, or if you notice them just, sweating a lot, or if they are working. So overall, general guidelines for feeding the senior horse: keep an eye on weight. I always encourage people to monitor weight every couple of weeks, have their teeth checked by a veterinarian regularly. Some horses do fine on every year exam. Some horses need a little more than that. The weather is key. Keep an eye on the weather. Older horses are very sensitive to severe weather. When it's cold, they're definitely going to need some more hay. When it's hot, you want to make sure they're able to cool themselves. Shelter is critical no matter what. And any feed can be soaked to help increase that water intake. That's never going to be a bad thing. Regular veterinary checkups are key. Wellness exams, doing fecal samples and monitoring them for parasite eggs is good to determine if you even need to deworm. And some other final take-home message from the Waltham group: as horses age, no matter what, whether they're healthy or whether they have an endocrine disorder, they need to have a slightly controlled carbohydrate diet. Again, even healthy older horses can have, it turns out, an altered glucose and insulin response to a meal. So if the horse is healthy, they can handle more moderate carbohydrates, so in the 20 to 25% range. If they have endocrine disorders, then we want to really limit it more. So some suggested feeds are obviously the Equate and the Equate Gut Health, the Senior Pellets, the Senior Textured. For horses that really need restriction on carbohydrates, the Safe and Easy and the Safe and Easy Performance. The Ultimate Finish is a fat supplement. And of course, Grow and Win is appropriate for these horses as well to supplement the protein and the vitamins and minerals. So as always, fiber and forage are key. Fat supplements will help with weight. Needs change throughout life. They change with the season. So it's always important to keep an eye on your horse no matter what. Water supply, crucial as always. And try to keep it simple. If customers are coming into you and everything seems very, very complicated, feel free to reach out. We can help you simplify it quite a bit. And that will wrap it up. So I hope I've given you some interesting insight into the senior horse, given you a little more background and some new selling points on the feeds. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Please feel free to ask, and I will, of course, post the recording online.